When Jack Harrington offered a free drink to the mysterious alien woman in his tavern, he had no idea she was testing his DNA for compatibility. Her emerald skin and silver hair marked her as different, but he couldn't have guessed she was billionaire heir Myra Theron Bell, secretly searching for a mate to save her empire from collapse. Outside New Avalon's polished metal towers, the blizzard screamed against the reinforced glass of Earth and Hearth Tavern. Inside, the fire crackled in its stone hearth, throwing dancing light across worn wooden floors. The scent of burning cedar and spiced meat filled the air, a stark contrast to the sterile atmosphere of the city beyond those walls. Jack Harrington moved behind the bar with the economical grace of a man who knew his space intimately. His hands polished glasses while his eyes tracked the room, a habit from his marine days he'd never shaken. The tavern held a mix of species tonight, a group of gruff miners from the asteroid belts, a couple of sleek corporate types, even a quiet scholar from the university district. They all shared the same need for warmth and company, a need Jack understood better than most. This place wasn't just a business to him. The wooden countertop shipped from Earth at considerable expense held the ghost of countless conversations. Marine Corps patches and a few carefully preserved service medals hung behind the bar, not for show but as reminders of a life he'd chosen to leave behind. Here, surrounded by the artifacts of his past, he'd built an anchor in a world that still felt alien. He served a frothing ale to a hulking patron with scaled skin, not flinching at the appearance, only nodding at the credit chip offered in return. His philosophy was simple. Bad weather made everyone equal. Strife and isolation were universal languages. He charged fair prices, kept the peace, and offered a neutral ground where titles and corporate ranks were checked at the door with the snow clinging to coats. The storm outside intensified, its moan deepening to a roar that vibrated the window panes. More figures rushed in from the freezing darkness, shaking ice from their garments, their relief palpable as the tavern's warmth hit them. The space grew louder, a comfortable cacophony of different languages and clinking glasses. Jack moved faster, his motions still smooth, still controlled, anticipating needs before they were spoken. He felt the shift in the room before he saw its cause. A lull in the conversation near the entrance, the subtle change in air pressure as the door opened against the wind's resistance. Every establishment like his was a crossroads, a place where paths intersected by chance or design. He looked up from the tap he was cleaning, his bartender's smile already forming, ready for the next customer seeking shelter. This one, however, would be different. The door was about to open on more than just another patron. It was about to open on a destiny he never saw coming. The heavy door groaned as it swung inward, cutting through the tavern's warm buzz like a blade. Every head turned. A figure stood silhouetted against the swirling white chaos outside, her form tall and strangely still amid the storm's fury. She stepped through and the door hissed shut behind her, sealing the cold out once more. Her skin was the deep green of forest shadows, her hair a cascade of liquid silver that fell to her waist. She wore a long coat of what looked like engineered spider silk, its subtle iridescence marking it as wealth most here could only imagine. But beneath the elegant exterior, her shoulders carried a visible fatigue, a tension that made her seem both regal and drained. She didn't look like someone who'd just stumbled in from the cold. She looked like someone who'd arrived. Her eyes, a startling gold, scanned the room with methodical precision. They didn't linger on faces but assessed exits, sightlines, potential threats. This wasn't the wandering gaze of a tourist or the grateful relief of a storm refugee. It was the measured observation of someone on a mission. She moved through the space with a natural grace that made the rough-hewn tables and scuffed floors seem suddenly inadequate, as if royalty had wandered into a barracks. Jack watched her from behind the bar, his polishing cloth going still in his hand. It wasn't just the unusual color of her skin or the obvious expense of her clothes. It was the way she held herself, like someone bearing a weight too heavy to name. Her posture was perfect, her chin level, but there was a slight tremor in her fingers as she unbuttoned her coat. He'd seen that kind of controlled exhaustion before. In mirrors, on dropships heading into contested airspace. A low murmur rose from the patrons. A miner elbowed his companion, nodding toward her. "Theron colors," he muttered. "That silver thread in the cuff, consortium elite." Another whispered about the security detail that must be waiting outside, unseen. Why would someone from the most powerful trading family in the sector come to a place like this? Not for the drinks, not for the atmosphere, She had purpose in her steps, and it put the whole room on edge. She ignored the stares, the whispers. Her survey of the room complete, she made her choice. Not a shadowed booth, not a corner table. She walked directly to the bar and took the central stool, the one right in front of the polished tap handles. She placed her gloves neatly on the counter, her movements economical and sure. She was now directly in Jack's line of sight, an unavoidable focal point. The hum of the tavern remained, but it was quieter now, charged with a new kind of anticipation. She had come to him. The polished wood of the bar felt solid under Jack's palms as he leaned toward her. His voice held its usual low rumble, the one he used to put nervous customers at ease. He didn't know she was far from nervous. She was hunting. Her name is Myra, he'd learned, but not yet. Looks like you could use something warm, he said. He gestured toward a heavy ceramic mug steaming on a warmer. Spiced cider. My own mix. Cuts through the cold like nothing else. She offered a thin smile that didn't reach her golden eyes. Her gaze was fixed on his hands, noting the calluses, the faded scar across his knuckles. She was cataloging him. That sounds acceptable, she replied, her voice melodic but devoid of real warmth. When he placed the mug before her, he waved off the credit chip she extended. On the house. Bad weather rule. His gesture of simple human decency was to her the successful springing of a trap. She accepted with a slight nod, her fingers curling around the warm ceramic. The drink was exactly as advertised. Cinnamon, clove, a hint of citrus, and a strong kick of local apple brandy. But it also contained something else. A proprietary nanite suspension, colorless, odorless, designed to slough off epithelial cells from the lips and mouth upon contact. A passive DNA sampler. As she took the first sip, her eyes never left his. She was assessing his reaction, his posture, the way he held himself. She asked him about the tavern, about life on New Avalon. Her questions were casual, but each one probed for information about his background, his stability, his health. He answered easily, talking about the challenges of running a small business, the interesting mix of clientele. He mentioned his past service only as time in the service, no, a vague nod to the medals behind him. He saw a wealthy, tired woman seeking shelter. She saw a potential genetic candidate finally within reach. Their conversation flowed like any other between a bartender and a new patron. He asked if she was visiting. She said she had business in the sector. He talked about the storm. She remarked on the tavern's unique atmosphere. It was a dance of half-truths and withheld realities. The warm, fragrant steam from their shared drink rose between them, a fragile screen masking a transaction colder than the ice hitting the windows. The significance of the moment hung on every small movement. The way her lips touched the mug's rim, the microscopic collection occurring with each sip. The cider's physical warmth was a stark counterpoint to the clinical, calculated purpose of her mission. This wasn't hospitality. It was a field test. The resolution was silent and biological. As she finished the drink, the nanites had done their work, gathering a pristine genetic sample for instant encrypted analysis. The test was complete. The results, already transmitting to a secure databank, would confirm what her initial profile of him had suggested. His DNA was a statistical anomaly, a near-perfect match for her own Narian genetic structure. The cider, his kind offer, had been nothing more than a delivery mechanism. The trap had been sprung with his own hospitality. He had just passed the first and most critical test, completely unaware that the woman before him was evaluating him, not as a person, but as a biological solution to a dynastic crisis. The truth of who she was and why she had really come was minutes away from shattering the quiet understanding between them. Her casual mentions of family obligations and sector logistics felt like pebbles dropped into a still pond, small things that rippled outward with implication. Jack leaned against the bar, wiping a clean spot on the wood, listening. She spoke of trade route inefficiencies and political deadlock in the New Avalon Council with an insider's precision. She knew voting blocks, she knew names, she knew which officials were for sale and which were merely stubborn. This wasn't the chatter of a tourist. This was the analysis of a player. His marine-trained mind, used to parsing briefings for subtext, caught the disconnect. The weary slump of her shoulders versus the sharp calculating light in her gold-flecked eyes. The expensive, understated fabric of her coat against the rustic wood of the bar stool. The story was wrong. She claimed to be in transit, a low-level logistics coordinator for a mid-tier shipping firm. But her knowledge was too intimate, her confidence too absolute for such a role. She spoke of billion credit deals with the detached ease of someone discussing the weather. Across the room, the whispers had not ceased. A group of Rigelian traders had fallen into a hushed conference, their elongated fingers pointing subtly in her direction. One of them, bolder than the rest, raised his glass toward her in a slow, deliberate toast. She ignored it, but the tension in her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She was recognized, and she did not want to be. Jack noted the slight tremor in her hand as she lifted her mug again. The warmth of the tavern, the spiced cider, his own calm presence, it was making her drop her guard. She was letting details slip, her carefully constructed facade fraying at the edges. He asked a simple question about her homeworld, a standard piece of bartender small talk. Her answer was a poetic, almost painful description of the singing crystal forests of Naria Prime, a place he knew was off-limits to all but the planetary elite. Her voice softened with a genuine, unguarded homesickness. For a moment, the powerful, weary woman was just someone missing the sound of the wind through a forest of gems. Then she caught herself. Her posture stiffened. The mask was back, but the crack had shown. The disparity between her immense, unspoken influence and this fleeting vulnerability was its own kind of mystery. The resolution came not from her, but from the datapad one of the Rigelians left on his table. The screen, forgotten in their hasty exit, was still lit. A newsfeed scrolled silently. The headline was about the upcoming Theron Consortium succession. The image beside it was a formal portrait. Her portrait, Myra Theron Bell, sole heir to the largest private economic entity in the sector. Her silver hair was coiled in an intricate formal style, her emerald face a mask of cool authority. The caption listed her estimated net worth in figures that were difficult to comprehend. Controlling interest in 7 major shipping lanes, mining rights across 3 systems, a personal fleet. Jack looked from the glowing screen back to the woman at his bar, the humble logistics coordinator, the heiress to an empire. The pieces snapped into place with a cold, hard clarity. Her presence here, the genetic test disguised as a drink, the weariness of someone carrying the weight of entire worlds. This wasn't about a storm or a chance encounter. This was about dynasty. This was about survival. And as that realization settled in his gut, the tavern's front door exploded inward in a shower of splintered wood and twisted metal. The front door didn't just open, it shattered. A blast of frozen wind and splintered wood tore through the room. The storm screamed inside, carrying with it 3 figures clad in matte black combat gear. Their faces were hidden behind sleek helmets, their bodies bristling with hardware that screamed professional mercenary. The lead intruder's voice cut through the chaos, a synthesized growl from his helmet's modulator. "Theron, you're coming with us. No one else needs to get hurt." The warm conversational hum of the tavern died instantly. It was replaced by the sound of scattering chairs, gasps, and the high-pitched whine of charging energy weapons. The Draxians' rifles were already up, their red targeting lasers painting dancing dots across the room, searching for their prize. The cozy space, with its soft firelight and scent of spiced cider, had become a kill box. Behind the bar, Jack Harrington's body moved before his mind fully processed the threat. The easy slouch of the tavern keeper vanished. His spine straightened, his shoulders squared. His right hand dropped below the counter and came up gripping a worn dark metal cylinder, a pulse baton, a heavy non-lethal tool he kept for the roughest nights. It was a souvenir from his military days, an old habit. His thumb found the activation stud. The air around the baton's tip wavered with a low thrum. The bartender was gone. The Marine was back. 2 of Myra's security team, previously posing as patrons at a corner table, were already in motion. Sleek pistols slid from concealed holsters. They fired with crisp, efficient shots that sizzled through the air, taking down the Draxian on the left. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. The mercenaries' return fire was a concentrated volley of searing plasma bolts. One guard cried out as a shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him into a table that cracked under the impact. The other was forced into cover, pinned behind an overturned barrel. Patrons scrambled. A table of miners overturned their heavy wooden slab for cover. Others simply ran for the back exit, a panicked stampede. The elegant, handcrafted space was being systematically destroyed. Plasma bolts scorched dark marks into the walls. A bottle of expensive whiskey on the top shelf exploded in a shower of glass and amber liquid. The crackling fireplace now cast flickering light on a scene of pure violence. The lead Draxian advanced on Myra, who stood frozen by the bar, her golden eyes wide. He holstered his rifle, pulling a pair of neural cuffs from his belt. He was confident, professional. He didn't see Jack, he saw the obstacle, the simple bartender. A mistake. As the mercenary reached for Myra, Jack moved. It wasn't a run. It was an explosive lunge, a vault over the bar that carried his full weight. The pulse baton swung in a short, vicious arc, connecting with the side of the Draxian's helmet. There was a sickening crack of composite armor, and a shower of blue sparks. The mercenary dropped without a sound, his body convulsing from the neural shock. The remaining two Draxians hesitated for a split second, their focus shifting from their target to the unexpected threat. That moment was all the remaining guard needed. He rose from behind the barrel and put two precise shots into the chest of the closest attacker. The final Draxian, realizing the operation had failed, backed toward the ruined doorway, firing a wild suppression burst before vanishing into the blizzard. Silence rushed back in, broken only by the moan of the wind through the broken door and the ragged breathing of the survivors. The tavern was a wreck of shattered glass, smoldering wood, and the acrid smell of ozone and blood. Jack stood over the fallen Draxian leader, his chest heaving, the pulse baton still humming in his white-knuckled grip. He looked at Myra. Her initial shock was gone, replaced by a look of stark, recalculating assessment. She wasn't looking at a bartender anymore. She was looking at the man who had just saved her life. The genetic match had just passed a far more practical test. The air in the tavern was thick with the smell of ozone and burnt wood. Smoke curled from a blackened scar on the floor where a plasma bolt had hit. Jack leaned against the ruined bar, the pulse baton still in his hand, its hum the only sound besides the wind whistling through the shattered door. Myra stood a few feet away, her composure regained, but her face was pale. She looked from the unconscious Draxian at their feet to the wreckage of the room, then directly at him. Her expression was no longer that of a woman seeking shelter. It was the look of someone about to deliver difficult news. "The cider," she said. Her voice was low, clear, and without its earlier pretense of warmth. It wasn't just a drink. It was a test. Jack just watched her, his breathing slowly returning to normal. He said nothing. He waited. She took a step closer, her movements economical. "Standard procedure for me. When I enter a new environment with a viable population, I screen for genetic compatibility. The cider contained a reagent, a passive collector. It gathers epithelial cells from the lips and mouth. A full DNA sequence." The words landed with a cold, clinical precision. Jack's mind replayed the moment. The steam rising from the mug. His offer, her careful sip. His gesture of kindness, her calculated acceptance. The warmth he'd felt in that exchange froze solid. His hospitality had been the trigger for a scientific procedure. The entire conversation, the fleeting sense of connection, it had all been part of an assessment. An audition. The results came through during the attack, she continued, her gold eyes holding his. There was no apology in them, only stark fact. Your compatibility rating with Narian physiology is 98.7%. It's not just high. It's unprecedented. It's a statistical anomaly they thought was theoretical. The revelation reframed everything. The way she'd watched him. Her pointed questions about his health, his background. It hadn't been curiosity. It was due diligence. The attraction he'd felt, the pull between them that had seemed so immediate and natural, now had a laboratory report attached to it. Their chemistry wasn't just pheromones or chance, it was data. It was validated by science. The most advanced genetic screening in the sector said they were a near-perfect match. The romantic potential he'd sensed was now a confirmed biological fact. He looked down at his hands, at the calluses and the scarred knuckles. A former Marine, a tavern keeper, and now this, the highest compatibility rating ever recorded. The words felt alien, disconnected from the man who'd just been mopping a floor and serving ale. The anticipation of what this meant was a cold knot in his stomach. This wasn't about a date. This wasn't about a relationship. This was about something far more significant, something that had brought armed mercenaries to his door. "What does that mean?" he asked, his own voice rough. "Unprecedented compatibility. What does it actually mean?" Myra didn't look away. "It means your genetic material is uniquely suited to combine with mine. It means you are, biologically, the ideal candidate to father my heir. The words were simple. Their implications were galactic. The political storm waiting outside this broken tavern was now directly tied to the DNA running through his veins. The personal had just become profoundly, terrifyingly political. He watched her from across the ruined tavern, the pulse baton still warm in his hand. The immediate danger had passed, but a heavier tension remained. Myra's posture was rigid, her emerald skin seeming to pale under the flickering emergency lights. She looked at the bodies being dragged out by her remaining guard, then back at Jack. The genetic revelation hung between them, a cold, clinical fact. Now came the reason for it. "My ascension day is in 3 months," she said. The words were flat, devoid of the melodic quality they'd held before. "Narian law is absolute. To fully inherit my family's holdings, I must present a viable heir, a child of my direct bloodline. If I do not—" She trailed off, her gaze drifting to the blizzard still raging beyond the broken door. "If I do not, control of the Theron consortium passes to my cousin Terran." The name landed with a dull thud. Jack knew the name or the reputation. Terran Theron was a frequent topic in the news feeds, always photographed at high-stakes auctions or surrounded by sycophants. A man known for short-term profiteering, for stripping assets and selling off divisions for quick capital. A man who viewed the thousands who worked for the consortium not as a responsibility, but as a line item on a balance sheet. "The council will not intervene," she continued, her voice gaining a bitter edge. "They adhere to tradition, no heir, no inheritance. It is that simple, and that final." The consortium's future, a sprawling network of shipping lanes, mining operations, and tech patents that formed the backbone of commerce in this sector, hinged on this single, biological deadline. The pressure wasn't just personal, it was galactic in scale. The stability of supply lines for a dozen worlds, the livelihoods of countless families, all rested on her ability to conceive a child within the next 90 days. This explained the desperation. It explained why a billionaire, Heir, would walk into a grimy human tavern on the edge of the mechanical city. The established matchmakers of her own society had offered her only politically advantageous unions with other elite families, each pairing carrying its own web of agendas and manipulations. She hadn't been looking for a political partner. She had been looking for a genetic solution. She needed someone outside the system, someone with no alliances, no agenda beyond the immediate moment. She had needed him. Jack felt the weight of it settle on him, his initial reluctance, the shock of being a subject in an experiment, was now met with a reality so vast it was difficult to grasp. This wasn't about whether he liked her, or whether he wanted a relationship. The personal spark between them, the attraction that had felt so genuine moments before, now carried the crushing weight of economic and political stability. His choice was no longer just his own. His refusal wouldn't just mean walking away from a complicated woman. It would mean handing the keys to a vast interstellar empire to a man who would likely dismantle it for parts, causing chaos across multiple sectors. He looked around his tavern. The broken glass, the scorch marks, the smell of smoke. This was just the beginning. The first clumsy attempt to stop her. Terran would not give up his inheritance without a fight. The attacks would escalate. They would become more sophisticated, more brutal. The 3-month deadline wasn't just a countdown to a birth, it was a countdown to a war. And he and Myra were standing squarely in the crosshairs. The next move would not be theirs to make. It would be a response to the increased threat their potential union had just unleashed. They didn't wait for the tavern's new door to be installed. This time there was no shattering of wood. A shaped charge on the side wall detonated with a concussive thump, blowing a gaping hole into the main room. Smoke and pulverized insulation filled the air. 6 Draxians in full tactical armor poured through the breach, their movements crisp and coordinated. The lead operative carried a heavy sonic disruptor, its emitter dish already glowing with a low hum. This wasn't an extraction team anymore. This was a cleanup crew. The second assault was a test of their fledgling partnership under the most extreme pressure imaginable. Jack's pulse baton was in his hand before the dust settled, his body already moving to put himself between Myra and the threat. But this time she didn't freeze. Her hand went to her left wrist, to a delicate silver bracelet that seemed like mere jewelry. With a flick of her thumb, the bracelet uncoiled. A filament of pure, crackling blue energy snapped into existence, lengthening into a 7-foot whip that hissed and spat in the smoky air. The transformation was instantaneous, practiced. The contrast between her elegant appearance and this deadly fluid weapon was staggering. The lead Draxian raised his disruptor. Myra's arm moved in a blur. The energy whip snaked out, not at the man, but at his weapon. The tip wrapped around the emitter dish. There was a shower of white sparks and the acrid smell of melted circuitry as the disruptor was torn from his hands and flung against the wall. Jack didn't waste the opening. He closed the distance in, 2 long strides, his baton driving into the mercenary's armored gut. The man grunted, doubling over, just as Myra's whip retracted and lashed out again, catching a second attacker across the legs and sending him crashing to the floor. Their fighting styles meshed with an unexpected, almost frightening synergy. His was close quarters, brutal efficiency, ground and pound. Hers was distance and precision, a deadly dance of sweeping arcs and pinpoint strikes. When Jack drove an opponent back with a series of heavy blows from his baton, he'd instinctively create an opening, pushing the mercenary right into the path of Myra's whipping energy tendril. She moved with a dancer's grace, the whip an extension of her will, disabling weapons, tripping opponents, and creating distractions that allowed Jack to get inside their defenses. It felt like they had trained together for years, not met just yesterday. The tavern suffered for it. A wild sweep of the energy whip sheared the legs off a heavy table. A missed plasma bolt from a Draxian rifle hit the remaining stock of liquor behind the bar, and the resulting fire sent tongues of blue flame licking up the wall. Jack used a chair as an improvised shield, splintering it against an armored forearm. The brutal melee was a symphony of destruction, each coordinated move between them saving a life but costing a piece of the place he'd built. The anticipation of survival was a razor's edge. They were outnumbered 3-1 by professionals, but the Draxians were used to predictable corporate security, not this raw, improvised combination of military discipline and alien lethality. The last attacker finally fell, his armor smoking. From a combined strike, Jack's baton to his knee, Myra's whip disarming him. Silence descended, heavier and more complete than before. The resolution was absolute devastation. The tavern was a ruin. The air reeked of smoke, ozone, and blood. They stood amidst the wreckage, breathing hard, looking at each other across the carnage. The last of the adrenaline sang in their veins. In that shared, breathless moment, the professional distance between genetic candidate and desperate heir evaporated. They had just fought for their lives together, and won. Their eyes met across. The wreckage and something electric passed between them. The Council of Elders chamber was a vast, silent space of polished onyx and cold blue light. The circular table seemed to stretch for miles, each ancient Narian elder a stern monument to tradition. Their faces were carved from the same unyielding stone as the walls. At the center of the storm, Myra stood alone before them. Well, not entirely alone. Jack stood a pace behind her right shoulder, a solid, silent presence in simple civilian clothes. And across the table, her cousin Taryn watched with the patient, hungry eyes of a predator who scents a weakening rival. His perfectly tailored suit and smug expression were a stark contrast to the formal robes of the council. He wasn't just an observer. He was the alternative. Counselor Perrin, the eldest among them, spoke first. His voice was like grinding stones. This human. The word was a condemnation in itself. His presence here is an affront to generations of custom. The Theron bloodline is a sacred trust. It cannot be diluted by outside influence. The rigid governance structures, rules carved over centuries, were a wall. Myra's desire for autonomy, for the simple right to choose her own partner, was a battering ram against it. The tension was a physical weight in the air. This wasn't a discussion. It was an inquisition. Leva, Myra's chief assistant, stepped forward from the shadows near the wall. She was young for the room, her own silver hair cut in a practical modern style. "With respect, Elder Perrin," she said, her voice calm but firm. The consortium's recent profit margins under Myra's interim leadership have increased 17%. Operational efficiency is up. Labor disputes are down. These are measurable results. The Theron Consortium is not a museum piece. It is a living, breathing entity that requires competent leadership to survive. She wasn't arguing about bloodlines. She was talking about merit. Her advocacy was a strategic pivot, a new weapon in this political battle. The council's skepticism was a thick fog. An elder with facial tattoos denoting a millennia-old house scoffed. Competence is irrelevant if the line is broken. This experiment risks everything for a fleeting personal whim. The deeper prejudices were laid bare. This wasn't about Jack, it was about change. It was about the terrifying idea that the old ways, the pure ways, might not be the only ways. Their resistance was a force of nature, and it was forcing Myra's hand. She could submit, accept a politically approved Narian mate chosen by the council, and save her inheritance by sacrificing her freedom. Or she could do something radical. The anticipation was a knot in her stomach. How do you navigate a system designed to say no? How do you fight a battle where the rules are written by your opponents? She looked from Terran's smug face to the impassive elders, then back to Leva, who gave her a nearly imperceptible nod. Leva's argument had given her an opening, a crack in the wall of tradition. It wasn't about defending her choice of a human. It was about redefining the very basis of power. The resolution began to form not from defiance but from a colder, more calculating place. Leva had advocated for leadership based on competence, on proven results, not the accident of birth. It was a progressive idea, a dangerous one. It was the key. Myra looked at the council, her back straight, her golden eyes clear. She had made her choice. It was time to show them how radical she was willing to be. The decision that would break centuries of tradition was ready on her lips. The silence in the council chamber was absolute. Myra looked from the ancient, stone-faced elders to her cousin Terran's gloating smile. The rules of this room were a cage. She decided to break the cage. "I renounce it," she said. Her voice was clear, calm, and carried to every corner of the vast space. "I renounce my claim to the Theron inheritance." The reaction was immediate. A collective intake of breath hissed through the room. Councillor Perrin shot to his feet, his aged face a mask of outrage. "This is heresy. You cannot renounce your blood. It is your duty, The radical move was a grenade tossed onto the polished onyx table. It threatened to shatter centuries of unbroken tradition, to upend power structures that had governed their society for generations. Terran's smile widened into a triumphant grin. He had won. The consortium was his. Then Myra dropped the second revelation. It was quieter, but it landed harder. "The bloodline is secure," she stated, her hand resting briefly on her abdomen. "I carry a viable heir. The Theron legacy will continue." The chamber went dead silent again, but for a different reason. The calculation changed entirely. The council's primary objection, the end of the dynasty, was just neutralized. The child existed. The heir was real. She laid out her solution. The Theron holdings would not pass to her, nor would they default to Terran. Instead, they would be placed into an independent trust. A board of experienced professionals, vetted and approved by the council itself, would manage the consortium's operations. Profit would be reinvested, the workforce protected, stability maintained. The trust would preserve the entity while granting her the freedom she desperately wanted. It was a compromise that addressed their fears of instability while honoring her demand for autonomy. Throughout this, Jack never moved from his place behind her. His presence was a silent argument. He wasn't a supplicant. He wasn't a petitioner. He was her partner. His simple, grounded stance, his calm demeanor in the face of their obvious disdain, demonstrated the authenticity of their union more powerfully than any words could. He was her choice, and he was standing by it. The council's reaction was deeply mixed. Elder Pren looked apoplectic, his hands trembling with fury, but other younger members were thoughtful. They saw the numbers Leva had presented. They saw the logic. The trust structure was a modern solution to an ancient problem. It prioritized the health of the consortium itself over rigid adherence to a single family's control. There was resistance, but there was also a dawning pragmatic recognition that this might actually work. The anticipation hung on the council's decision. Would tradition crush this unprecedented proposal? Would they side with Terran and the old ways, triggering a potentially destructive succession battle? Or would they see the cold, hard sense in her plan? The resolution came not with a bang, but with a slow nodding of heads. A majority, led by the more pragmatic members, saw the value in stability. The trust was accepted. Love, in its most practical and defiant form, had triumphed over dynastic politics. Myra had not won a battle. She had changed the game. She walked out of that chamber with Jack, not as the heir to an empire, but as a free woman. The political war was over. The personal work of building their new life was just beginning. They walked out into the corridor, the heavy doors sealing behind them, leaving the stunned council and a furious Tehran in their wake. The theoretical was now practical. They had a tavern to rebuild. The tavern lay in ruins around them, a monument to the fight for their future. The air still held the sharp scent of ozone and the bitter tang of smoke from the electrical fires. Charred wood and shattered glass littered the floor where tables and chairs had stood. This destruction became their first joint project. The physical labor of rebuilding earth and hearth started the next morning. They worked side by side for hours, clearing debris, sweeping up glass, and salvaging what furniture could be repaired. It was dirty, demanding work. Myra's presence on that first day was a study in contrasts. Her hands, usually occupied with data slates and executive decisions, now gripped a heavy wooden beam to help Jack lift it. Sawdust settled in her silver hair, a stark contrast to its usual perfect sheen. Her fine clothes were soon smudged with soot and grime. There was no hesitation. A woman who could command boardrooms and wield an energy whip now learned the rhythm of sanding wood. The pressure needed to set a nail without splitting the grain, the exact pour for a perfect ale. Each task was an act of commitment, a physical promise that she was here to build, not just to lead. This shared effort did not go unnoticed. By the second day, a curious crowd began to gather. A few of Jack's regulars showed up with tools. The gruff miner who'd first recognized her brought a laser level. The Rigelian traders returned not to drink, but to help rewire the damaged lighting system with their delicate, precise hands. Wide-eyed locals, drawn by the gossip of the billionaire heiress working a sander, stayed to carry lumber. The diverse crowd was a signal. The neighborhood was watching, and it was beginning to accept this strange new partnership. The tavern was becoming a nexus, a point where different cultures and species met not just to drink, but to create something together. Slowly, the ruin transformed. The new bar top was a seamless fusion of earth oak and Narian sunwood, its warm grain a blend of their two worlds. The walls, patched and repainted, now held a new display, Jack's marine metals alongside a framed schematic of a Theran freighter. The space began to embody their merged identities. It was no longer just Jack's refuge or a curiosity for Myra. It was theirs. A place built on shared sweat and a common vision. The anticipation was quiet but profound. This humble place, this symbol of his old life, was being reforged as the anchor for their new one. The resolution was in the final details. The last shelf was hung. The final glass was polished. The tavern stood whole again, but it was more than it had been. It was a symbol of collaboration, a proof that something strong could be built from the broken pieces of the past, not by one person, but by a community drawn together by a shared goal. It represented a new kind of social integration, one based on mutual effort rather than mere tolerance. The work was done. The space was ready. It was time to open the doors and see what they had built together. The quiet work of restoration was over. The noisy, vibrant work of running their new enterprise was about to begin. 3 months later, earth and hearth stood transformed. The scent of sizzling Narian spice root now mingled with the familiar aroma of roasted earth grains. The menu offered steaming bowls of Terran stew alongside delicate blue-shelled crustaceans from Naria's northern seas. The clientele was a seamless mix. A table of human engineers shared a pitcher of ale with a group of Narian data sifters. The initial awkwardness had faded, replaced by the easy hum of shared meals and curiosity. Their success quietly challenged the preconceptions hanging over New Avalon. Interspecies collaboration wasn't just possible, it was profitable. It was pleasant. Myra's presence as a co-leader was a constant, engaged force. She wasn't a silent investor. She worked the floor, her silver hair often tied back with a simple cord, her elegant hands now just as capable of carrying a heavy tray as signing a corporate directive. She knew the regulars by name, both human and Narian. Her insights into supply chains and interstellar logistics revolutionized their sourcing. bringing in exotic ingredients at costs that made the expanded menu viable. Her work here, this hands-on rebuilding, was transforming the local economy far more effectively than any corporate mandate from a distant tower ever could. It earned a respect that money alone could never buy. In the background, the trust she had created managed the vast Theron consortium with quiet efficiency. Quarterly reports showed stability, even growth. The feared economic collapse never came. The professional board navigated trade disputes and market fluctuations with a calm competence that even the skeptical council elders had to acknowledge. The stability of entire sectors, once hinging on a single berth, now rested on this modern, distributed system. It worked. Jack's practical ethics provided the grounding for their new life. His insistence on fair prices, quality ingredients, and a place where everyone had a seat at the table became the core of their expanding enterprise. He was the anchor. She was the sail, and their family was growing. Myra's pregnancy was now visible, a gentle curve beneath her work apron. It represented the first human-Narian hybrid generation, a living bridge between two cultures. The anticipation surrounding the child was a tangible thing. What would it be like? Would it have her emerald skin? His blue eyes? Would it inherit her strategic mind, his steady hands? The child was a question mark, a promise of a future where the lines between human and alien were no longer barriers but beginnings. It was the physical embodiment of the risk they had taken and the hope they had built. They had done more than just save an inheritance or rebuild a tavern. They had created a new model of leadership, one based on service and partnership rather than domination and isolation. Power wasn't a throne to sit on alone. It was a tool to build with, shared with the community it was meant to serve. The humble tavern, once a refuge for one man, was now the heart of a small revolution. It proved that competence and character could trump bloodline and tradition. The story of a marine and an heiress was becoming the blueprint for something much larger, their personal journey echoing across the cold metallic canyons of the city, challenging everyone who heard it to imagine a different way forward. Jack Harrington never wanted the spotlight. He built his life around quiet purpose, the steady rhythm of a clean glass and a poured drink. The discipline of his marine years gave him that. It wasn't about glory. It was about order, a place for everything, a system. That training was a foundation built in his bones, a structure of readiness he thought he'd left behind on distant battlefields. He had no idea that foundation was about to be tested on a whole new front. The irony of his situation was a quiet, constant hum in the back of his mind. He had traded the structured chaos of the core for the simple, predictable chaos of a tavern. His desires were modest, a good reputation, a place where people felt safe, a life built on his own terms, away from the complex machinery of power. Then a woman with emerald skin walked through his door and his simple world exploded into an interstellar drama. He was handed a destiny of billion-credit stakes and political warfare, a future he never asked for and certainly never wanted. His greatest strength in all of it was his refusal to want it. While others in Myra's orbit saw her as a title, a corporation, a key to power, Jack saw only her weariness, her intelligence, the weight she carried. His focus remained narrow and pure, her happiness. This wasn't a strategy. It was his character. He wasn't playing a long game for influence. He was simply consistently committed to the woman he loved. In a world of agendas and manipulation, that steadfast lack of agenda became his most powerful asset. The skills that once served him in combat found new purpose. The ability to assess a threat in a split second helped him read a hostile council member's posture. The tactical mind used to plan an assault was now applied to supply chain logistics for the tavern. The protective instinct that made him a good squad leader made him a fierce and loyal partner. The foundation was the same. The application had changed. He was still assessing, protecting, and leading. He was just using different tools. His grounded nature was the anchor that stabilized Myra's vast political power. Her vision was galactic in scale, abstract and filled with potential pitfalls. His perspective was immediate, practical. He asked the simple questions others were too embroiled in complexity to see. Would this decision hurt people? Was it fair? Did it make sense on the ground, in the streets, and not just on a data slate? He was the gravity that kept her soaring ambitions from flying into the sun. The humility he learned behind the bar, serving all comers as equals, became the core of his leadership style. He didn't command respect. He earned it through action. He never presented himself as more than what he was, a man doing his best with the tools he had. This quiet confidence, devoid of arrogance, disarmed opponents and built alliances. People trusted him because he asked for nothing but honesty in return. This makes you wonder how ordinary people ever manage to do extraordinary things. They don't set out to be heroes. They don't wake up wanting to change the galaxy. They are simply presented with a moment, a choice, and the person they have always been rises to meet it. The preparation is in the living, in the daily practice of being decent, capable, and true. True heroism isn't about a single grand gesture. It emerges from the consistency of character under pressure. It's the refusal to break, to compromise, to become someone else when the world gets complicated. Jack's heroism was built in the quiet years before Myra arrived, in the discipline of his service and the integrity of his tavern. When pressure was applied, that character didn't change, it held. It was the one thing everyone, from the lowliest patron to the highest elder, could depend on. This consistency under fire is what truly defines a life, and it begs the question of what really matters when the dust settles, the grand title you held or the person you remained. The genetic test hung between them like a ghost in the machine. It was a number, a percentage, a clinical verdict from a Beverage, 98.7%. That figure said their bodies were designed to fit together, that their DNA strands meshed with an almost perfect scientific harmony. It introduced a startling idea, a question that undercut every romantic notion they might have had. Was this love or was it programming? Was their connection something fated, written in their very cells, or did they have any say in the matter at all? The technological intervention created a sharp tension with the classic romance narrative. We're taught that love is a mystery, a spark, a bolt from the blue. It's not supposed to come with a laboratory report. Myra's initial approach was entirely clinical. She wasn't looking for a partner. She was sourcing a solution. Jack was at first just the most promising data point in a desperate search. The setup felt cold, transactional. It was a premise that could have easily curdled into a story about manipulation, about a love built on a lie of omission. But their choices after that initial, calculated meeting are what truly defined them. The DNA match was the catalyst, the door swinging open. They were the ones who chose to walk through it. Jack chose to stand by her against the Draxians, not because some genetic code told him to, but because it was the kind of man he was. He chose to face down a hostile council. Myra chose to renounce an empire for a chance at a real life with him. She chose to pick up a sander and help rebuild a broken tavern with her own hands. These were actions. These were decisions made in full awareness of the pressure and the stakes, and the political pressures were immense. They could have distorted everything. The threat of losing her inheritance, the constant danger from Terran, the scorn of the elders. This external chaos could have turned their relationship into a tense business arrangement, a partnership of pure survival. It didn't. Under that pressure, something genuine grew. The shared fights, the quiet moments in the moonlit penthouse, the grueling work of restoration. These experiences forged a bond that was far stronger than any genetic report. Their continued daily choice of each other, despite the easier paths available, was what ultimately validated the science. The compatibility was potential. Their love was the reality they built upon it. This balance gives the story its richness. It doesn't dismiss the science, but it doesn't bow to it either. It lives in the complex space between destiny and agency, asking a crucial question. What makes a connection authentic? Is it the unseen forces that draw us together, or the conscious decisions we make to stay together? The answer the story offers is that it's both, but the choice is heavier. The initial pull might be chemistry, or in this case, literally, genetic chemistry. But the work, the trust, the commitment, that's all choice. The resolution is clear. Science can map a genome. It can identify a staggering statistical probability for a successful pairing. It can point to a person and say, there, that one is your ideal match. But it cannot make you love them. It cannot make you fight for them. It cannot make you rebuild a life with them. That part is always up to us. The potential for a soulmate might be written in the stars or in our DNA. But the actual love is written in the choices we make every single day. This subtle but powerful distinction shifts the entire narrative, moving it from a story of predestination to one of profound personal agency, setting the stage for the broader cultural impact such a union would inevitably create. Myra's willingness to engage in physical labor was the clearest signal of her transformation. She didn't delegate the restoration of earth and hearth. She joined it. Her hands, accustomed to handling delicate data slates and ceremonial artifacts, now gripped a sander, learning the coarse vibration of wood under pressure. Sawdust settled in her silver hair. Soot smudged the fine fabric of her tunic. She mixed drinks alongside Jack, memorizing the exact pour for a perfect ale, her movements becoming as practiced as his. This wasn't a publicity gesture. It was an authentic commitment, a physical declaration that she was here to build, not merely to oversee. This hands-on approach fundamentally challenged the standard notion of power. Traditional interstellar governance, from the Theron dynasty to the Narration Council, valued control and domination. Leadership was a pyramid, with one person at the top issuing commands. Myra's choice was different. By working alongside the diverse group of locals who came to help, from the gruff miner to the sleek Rigelian traders, she was demonstrating a different principle. She earned genuine hard-won respect through shared effort, not inherited title. People didn't bow to her. They worked with her. They began to see her not as a distant billionaire, but as a capable partner in a community project. Her restructuring of the Theron Consortium embodied this philosophy on a galactic scale. The trust she created was the ultimate expression of distributed power. She didn't just hand control to another individual like her cousin Taryn. She broke the power into pieces, entrusting it to a council of experienced managers. This system was designed to prevent any single person from exploiting the consortium's vast resources for personal gain. It prioritized the long-term health of the enterprise and the well-being of everyone who depended on it, over the aggrandizement of one ruler. The power wasn't concentrated. It was shared. Her personal measure of success was rewritten. The endless pursuit of wealth and influence, the driving force of her family for generations, was abandoned. Her happiness with Jack, the solid, simple life they were building together in the tavern, became her new metric. This was a radical departure. It suggested that true power wasn't about how much you controlled, but about the quality of the life you built and the people you built it with. Her choice to prioritize a genuine connection over dynastic duty challenged every assumption about what leadership and inheritance were supposed to mean for someone in her position. This new model, born from the ashes of a bar fight and forged in the quiet labor of rebuilding, didn't go unnoticed. The initial skepticism from the council gave way to a pragmatic, if reluctant, approval as the trust arrangement proved stable and profitable. The success of Earth and Hearth as a thriving interspecies hub became a local symbol of what was possible. Other powerful families in the sector watched. They saw an heiress who was happier sanding a floor than sitting on a throne. They saw a business that flourished under distributed leadership. They saw that true lasting power didn't come from a name or a title. It emerged from demonstrable competence and a tangible commitment to the people you lead. This quieter, more collaborative approach to influence began to ripple outward, suggesting that the old ways of command might not be the only path forward in an evolving galaxy. New Avalon itself was the real experiment. The gleaming metallic towers and cross-system docking ports functioned as a massive melting pot, a convergence point where dozens of species collided daily. Cracks merchants haggled with human engineers in crowded market corridors. Valyrian pilots shared navigation data with Narration logisticians over hurried meals. This constant, pressurized interaction created a volatile social ecosystem, a mirror of the planet's own unstable weather patterns. The potential for brilliant collaboration existed alongside the ever-present risk of explosive conflict. The social fabric was strained, tested daily by ancient prejudices and competing agendas. The city was a pressure cooker, and everyone inside was waiting to see if it would forge something new or simply blow apart. In this volatile environment, Earth and Hearth became a controlled microcosm of successful exchange. The tavern's warm, wooden interior, so different from the city's sleek architecture, offered a neutral ground. It became a working model of integration. The diverse crowd that rebuilt it, human, Narration, Rigelian, now filled its tables, sharing stories over shared meals. The menu itself was a testament to collaboration, a fusion of Terran and Narration cuisine that required understanding and compromise. It proved that successful coexistence wasn't just about tolerance. It was about creating something new and valuable together, something that belonged to everyone. Their hybrid child represented the next phase of this experiment. This new life would inherit the world they were actively shaping, a living bridge between two cultures. The child would be the first of its kind, a testament to the possibility that had once seemed like a fantasy. It carried the potential to challenge deeply ingrained prejudices simply by existing, by thriving. Its future would be the ultimate test of whether their personal gamble could translate into lasting, broader social change. Economically, the stability of the Theron Consortium, now managed by its innovative trust, provided a crucial foundation. The new leadership model, born from their refusal to accept traditional dynastic rule, encouraged a more collaborative and forward-thinking approach. Profits were reinvested. New trade agreements were forged with an eye toward mutual benefit, not just corporate gain. This economic steadiness gave the social experiment room to breathe. It proved that challenging old power structures could lead to greater prosperity and security for everyone involved, not just chaos. Their personal success story began to chip away at long-held suspicions. The sight of a human man and a Narian heiress working side by side, not as master and servant but as equal partners, forced people to reconsider what was possible. The initial whispers of disapproval from certain Narian elites slowly gave way to a grudging curiosity, and for some, a quiet admiration. Their relationship became living evidence that compatibility wasn't limited by species, but was built on respect, shared values, and choice. The long-term impact of their example was the real question. Could this one couple's defiance of tradition inspire others? Could the model of earth and hearth be replicated in other sectors, other cities? Their story suggested that the rigid social hierarchies governing interstellar relations were not immutable. They were choices, and choices could be changed. In the end, their journey proves that the most significant changes often begin not with grand declarations, but with personal decisions. A choice to offer kindness, a choice to stand your ground, a choice to build instead of destroy. These individual actions create ripples that spread outward, touching lives and shifting cultures in ways that are impossible to predict. A bartender's simple act of hospitality in a storm didn't just change two lives. It sent a tremor through the foundation of an entire civilization, challenging it to imagine a more integrated, collaborative future. So it turns out that hospitality can be the most revolutionary act of all. One simple offer of a drink from a man who believed everyone deserved warmth in a storm. That quiet choice ignited a chain reaction. It challenged dynasties. It reshaped laws. It forged a new kind of family. The most extraordinary futures often grow from the smallest, most ordinary decisions we make. It's a reminder. Look up from your own world. You never know what destiny is waiting in the storm, just hoping for a little kindness and a warm place to rest.